You found the Stealth Podcast. Tonight, we'll travel through dark and lonely stories. Where in the world are you watching from? What time is it there? Subscribe and leave your like to support us. Let's begin. I'm Liam Hargrove, 34 years old, and I call Pittsburgh home. At least that's where my mail gets delivered to my sister's place. Truth is, home for me is wherever I park my converted 2015 Sprinter van. After burning out at my marketing job, I decided corporate America could kiss my ass. Traded my apartment for a van, my desk for a steering wheel, and never looked back. The whole #Vanlife thing online. Yeah, it's mostly bullshit. Nobody posts about the freezing nights or how you're constantly searching for places to shower. But freedom has its price, and I was willing to pay it. I'd been documenting my travels on my small YouTube channel. Nothing huge, just enough followers to make some ad revenue to supplement my freelance graphic design gigs. My latest project brought me to rural Ohio, just outside a small town called Blackwood. Some local business wanted website work, and I figured I'd explore the area while I was at it. Ohio has these pockets of wilderness that nobody talks about, perfect for someone like me who enjoys getting off the grid for a few days. I'd heard about this place called Stillwater Creek from a fellow Vanlifer, supposedly remote, but with decent cell reception if you park on the ridge. I pulled into Blackwood around dusk, stopping at the only gas station to fill up. The attendant, a weathered man in his 60s with hands like tree bark, barely acknowledged me as I paid. "You passing through?" he finally asked, sliding my change across the counter. There was something in his tone that felt more like a suggestion than a question. "Staying a few days?" I replied, pocketing the change. "Doing some work for Henderson's Hardware." The mention of a local business usually eased suspicions in small towns like this. His expression shifted slightly, not exactly warming, but at least acknowledging I had legitimate business. He grunted and turned back to the ancient TV mounted behind the counter. As I walked out, I noticed 3 men beside a pickup truck watching me. They weren't trying to hide their stares, tracking me as I walked to my van. Small towns had always made me uneasy. The way everyone notices an outsider, how conversations stop when you enter a room. But something about their stares felt different. Predatory. I drove through downtown Blackwood, all 5 blocks of it, taking in the boarded-up storefronts and faded American flags. The hardware store was closed, but I'd meet with the owner tomorrow. For now, I needed to find somewhere to park for the night. Following the directions I'd saved on my phone, I turned onto a narrow road heading into the hills towards Stillwater Creek. The pavement eventually gave way to gravel, which seemed to fade with each mile deeper into the woods. As darkness fell, I finally reached the ridge overlooking the creek. The spot was perfect, flat enough to sleep comfortably, hidden from the main road, yet with just enough bars on my phone to check emails in the morning. I backed the van in, positioning it for a quick exit, a habit that had saved me from awkward encounters with property owners more than once. Little did I know it would soon become much more than just a precaution. I woke to the sound of rain pattering against the roof. After making coffee on my portable stove, I checked the time, 7:30 a.m., plenty of time before my 10 o'clock meeting. I opened my laptop to review the website mockups when my phone buzzed. A text from Henderson. "Need to reschedule. Family emergency." Great. Now I had a free day in the middle of nowhere, Ohio. Deciding to make the most of it, I planned to explore Stillwater Creek. The rain had stopped, leaving behind that earthy smell and a heavy mist that hung between the trees. I grabbed my camera and locked the van. Photography was my hobby, and misty forests made for moody shots perfect for my Instagram. About half a mile down the trail, I discovered an old stone foundation, remains of a house or mill, maybe. As I framed up a shot, I heard a branch snap behind me. I turned, expecting a deer, but saw nothing through the fog. That prickly feeling crept up my spine, the sensation of being watched. I told myself it was just the isolation playing tricks on my mind. When I returned to my van around noon, something felt off. The door was still locked, nothing visibly disturbed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there. I did a quick inventory, laptop, camera gear, wallet, all accounted for. Maybe I was being paranoid. Still, I decided to drive into town for lunch rather than eat the sandwich I'd packed. The Blackwood Diner was exactly what you'd expect. Vinyl booths, faded menus, and suspicious glances from the locals. I slid into a corner booth and ordered a burger from a waitress whose name tag read Doreen. As she walked away, I noticed a group of men at the counter watching me. One of them, heavy-set with a scraggly beard, was definitely from the gas station yesterday. "You're the van guy," he said, not a question but an accusation. He approached my table, coffee mug in hand. "Staying up at Stillwater?" Before I could answer, he continued, "Wouldn't recommend it. Had some trouble up there last summer. Missing hikers." His friends at the counter snickered. "Thanks for the concern," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "I'll be moving on soon anyway." This seemed to satisfy him, but as he returned to his friends, I heard him mutter something about outsiders and teaching lessons. After lunch, I drove to the library to use their Wi-Fi. Between emails, I searched for information about missing hikers near Blackwood. Nothing came up, but I did find some local history. The town had once been a mining community until the coal dried up in the 80s. The economic collapse that followed had clearly left its mark. As I drove back towards Stillwater Creek at dusk, I noticed a mud-spattered pickup following me. It kept its distance, but remained behind me turn after turn. When I pulled into a convenience store, it continued past, the driver's face hidden beneath a worn baseball cap. Coincidence? Probably. But combined with the strange warning at the diner, I was starting to feel uneasy about my secluded camping spot. Back at the ridge, I found fresh tire tracks that weren't mine cutting through the mud near my parking spot. Someone had definitely been here while I was gone. I checked my van thoroughly. Nothing missing, nothing damaged, but I found a small piece of paper tucked under my windshield wiper. In blocky handwriting, "Leave tonight." No signature, no explanation. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Every sound from the woods set my nerves on edge. The hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves, the occasional crack of branches in the wind. I decided to stay despite the warning. Letting some small-town intimidation tactics chase me away felt like giving in, and besides, I'd dealt with unwelcoming locals before. Rural Pennsylvania had been worse, or so I thought. Around 2 a.m., headlights swept across my van's interior. I froze, watching through my tinted windows as 3 vehicles, 2 pickup trucks and an SUV, parked in a semicircle around my van. Their engines died, but the headlights remained on, blinding and trapping me in their glare. I counted 7 men as they stepped out, silhouettes carrying what looked like hunting rifles and baseball bats. "We know you're in there, Pittsburgh," a voice called out. "Time for a little talk about respecting local boundaries." The voice belonged to the bearded man from the diner. I recognized his massive frame, even in silhouette. My heart hammered against my ribs as I weighed my options: stay inside my locked van or try to reason with them. Deciding that confrontation was inevitable, I slipped on my shoes and grabbed my phone, quickly pressing the emergency SOS button before shoving it in my pocket. I didn't expect much help way out here, but it was something. I also grabbed my knife from the kitchen drawer. Not much against rifles, but better than nothing. Coming out, I called, trying to keep my voice steady. "No need for trouble." I opened the door slowly, hands visible, and stepped down. The headlights were disorienting, the figures behind them just dark shapes. "What's this about?" "I'm just passing through, doing some freelance work for Henderson's." The bearded man stepped forward. Up close, I could see a jagged scar running from his left eye to his jaw. "Henderson called. Said you canceled on him. So what are you really doing here?" His breath reeked of whiskey and chewing tobacco. "We've had problems with outsiders before. Taking pictures, asking questions, things going missing." "There's been a misunderstanding," I said, mind racing. Henderson had texted me about rescheduling. "I'm a graphic designer. I take photos for my Instagram. That's it." I gestured toward my van. "Check my laptop if you want. It's all there." Another man stepped forward, taller, leaner, with cold eyes that reflected the headlights. "We saw you poking around the old mill foundation. Taking pictures. That property's private." "I didn't see any signs," I protested. "Look, I'll delete the photos right now." I reached for my pocket, but instantly 3 rifles raised toward me. "Slow," Beard growled. "Real slow." As I carefully pulled out my phone, the lean man snatched it from my hand. "No service out here anyway," he sneered, dropping it to the ground and crushing it under his boot. Oops. The circle tightened around me, and I caught glimpses of faces in the headlights. Weathered, angry, some almost gleeful at the prospect of violence. One younger man looked uncertain, but said nothing as Beard grabbed my shirt collar. You city people think you can just go anywhere, do anything, he hissed. This is our land, our town, our rules. He shoved me hard against the van, my head cracking against the metal. Stars exploded behind my eyes as he continued. We've got our own justice here. Don't need cops or courts telling us how to handle trespassers. That's when I realized this wasn't just intimidation. These men hadn't come to scare me away. They'd come to make me disappear. Just like those missing hikers that had some trouble last summer. The metallic taste of blood filled my mouth as I struggled to stay conscious. Beard nodded to two men who grabbed my arms, pinning me against the van. Get his keys, he ordered. We'll take the van deeper in, where nobody finds things. The younger, hesitant man reluctantly patted down my pockets until he found my keys. My thoughts raced desperately. If they got me into those woods, I was dead. No witnesses, no evidence. Just another missing person who vanished in rural America. As the younger man moved toward my van door, I saw my only chance. A momentary gap in the circle of men as they shifted positions. I summoned every ounce of strength and drove my knee hard into Beard's groin. He doubled over with a guttural howl. Using the momentum, I twisted free from one captor and slammed my elbow into the other's nose. Blood erupted as he staggered backward. Before the others could react, I bolted for the gap between two trucks. Get him! Beard roared from the ground. A rifle cracked, and bark exploded from a tree inches from my head. I zigzagged through the undergrowth, branches whipping my face as shouts and more gunfire erupted behind me. My van was lost to me now, along with everything I owned, but that didn't matter if I didn't survive the night. I crashed downhill through the forest, following the slope toward what I hoped was Stillwater Creek. Water meant a path to follow, maybe a road eventually. The sounds of pursuit grew closer. They knew these woods far better than I did. A flashlight beam cut through the trees to my right. I dropped to the ground behind a fallen log just as two men rushed past, hunting rifles ready. He went this way, one called, pointing downhill. Toward the old quarry. Old quarry? That didn't sound good. Still, down was my only option. I waited until they moved ahead, then continued my desperate flight, staying low and moving as quietly as possible while still making distance. The forest floor was slick with mud and decaying leaves, making each step treacherous in the darkness. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, I heard the sound of running water. Stillwater Creek wasn't so still after the rain. I followed it downstream, wading into the cold water to mask my scent and tracks. My boots filled with water, clothes soaked through, but the October night air made hypothermia a real concern. I couldn't stay wet for long. A distant shout echoed through the trees, followed by the rumble of engines. They brought the vehicles around, probably using the old logging roads that crisscrossed these hills. The headlights swept across the creek ahead of me, and I ducked behind a boulder. They were cutting me off, hurting me like an animal. The creek bent sharply to the right, and as I rounded the curve, my heart sank. The water plunged over a small waterfall into what must be the quarry they'd mentioned, a gaping pit with sheer rock walls. I was trapped between the hunters and a cliff drop of unknown height. Desperate, I scrambled up the muddy bank and into the trees, looking for any path that didn't lead to the quarry edge. But the beams of flashlights converged from multiple directions, closing in. I pressed my back against a massive oak, trying to control my ragged breathing. My legs burned, my lungs were fire, and my head throbbed where it had struck the van. He's got to be here somewhere. A voice called, much too close. Check the creek edge. Footsteps splashed through water, and I knew I had seconds at most. The quarry edge loomed just yards away, a black void in the darkness. I had no idea how deep it was or what waited at the bottom. Certain death, or just probable death. The flashlight beams grew closer, sweeping across the ground mere feet from my hiding spot. I made my choice, probable death over certain torture. Taking a deep breath, I broke cover and sprinted for the quarry edge. Shouts erupted behind me, followed by the crack of a rifle. Something hot grazed my shoulder, but adrenaline dulled the pain. 3 more strides, and I launched myself into the darkness, praying the rain had filled whatever waited below. The fall seemed to last forever, my stomach lurching into my throat as wind rushed past my ears. Then came the impact, not with solid rock as I'd feared, but with frigid water that knocked the breath from my lungs. The quarry had indeed filled with rainwater over the years, deep enough to break my fall, but cold enough to kill me if I stayed in too long. I plunged deep, the murky water enveloping me in darkness far more complete than the night above. For a moment, disoriented and running out of air, I didn't know which way was up. Panic clawed at me until my boots scraped against something solid, the quarry floor. I pushed off hard, lungs burning, and broke the surface with a desperate gasp. Gunfire immediately peppered the water around me. I dove again, swimming away from the quarry edge where my pursuers stood. Their flashlights swept across the water's surface, searching for movement. The quarry was larger than I'd thought, perhaps an old mining operation that had filled with water after being abandoned. I surfaced again, this time more carefully, just enough to draw breath. "He's in the water," someone shouted. More gunfire followed, but they were shooting blindly now. I heard Beard's voice, furious and commanding. "Get down there. There's a path on the south side." They would be coming down to finish the job. I needed to find a way out, and fast. Treading water, I scanned the quarry walls, barely visible in the ambient moonlight. Most were sheer rock faces, impossible to climb in my condition, but on the far side, I spotted what looked like a service tunnel, probably used to drain the quarry when it was operational. Swimming silently toward it, each stroke was agony. The cold water had numbed my extremities, and the graze on my shoulder was a line of fire across my skin. Behind me, I could hear the men making their way down to the quarry floor, their voices echoing off the stone walls. The tunnel entrance loomed ahead, a dark archway half submerged in the water. It could be my salvation or a dead end that would seal my fate. As I reached it, I realized it was even narrower than it had appeared, barely wide enough for my shoulders. Worse, I had no idea how long it was, or if it was completely submerged further in. But with no other options, I took the deepest breath I could manage and pushed into the darkness. The tunnel was a nightmare of claustrophobia and blind panic. I pulled myself forward using the rough walls, completely submerged for stretches that left my lungs screaming for air. Just as I thought I couldn't go any further, my hand broke the surface. The tunnel had an air pocket. I gasped, filling my lungs, then continued. After what felt like an eternity of alternating between swimming and crawling through half-submerged passages, I saw a faint light ahead. The tunnel emptied into a larger drainage canal that led away from the quarry. I stumbled out, soaked and shivering violently, but alive. Dawn was breaking as I reached a highway several miles from Blackwood. A trucker took pity on the soaking, bloodied stranger I had become and gave me a ride to the next county. I didn't tell him the full story, just that I'd been mugged and lost everything. He probably didn't believe me, but he didn't ask questions either. From a hospital in Zanesville, I called my sister in Pittsburgh. The doctors treated me for hypothermia, a concussion, and the bullet graze on my shoulder. When the police asked what happened, I told them I'd been attacked by strangers while camping, but I left out specifics. What proof did I have? My van was gone, my phone destroyed, and my attackers' identities hidden behind the glare of headlights. It would be my word against an entire town. 2 weeks later, I saw a small news article online. Abandoned van found burned in rural Ohio quarry. They disposed of the evidence. I thought about reporting what really happened, but something stopped me. Fear that the reach of Blackwood's justice might extend beyond its borders. After all, they'd done this before. Those missing hikers weren't the first, and I doubted I'd be the last. Sometimes at night, I still jolt awake, feeling the sensation of falling into darkness. I've given up the van life and moved in with my sister. The open road no longer calls to me. Not when I know what waits in the shadows of small towns where outsiders aren't welcome. Not when I know how easily people can disappear in the vast American countryside, swallowed by the darkness that lurks just beneath the surface of rural hospitality. I'm Ezra Caldwell, 31 years old, from Portland, Maine. 6 months ago, I quit my soul-crushing job as a financial analyst and converted a 2018 Mercedes Sprinter into what my social media followers call the most luxurious tiny home on wheels. The truth is, living in 80 square feet isn't glamorous, regardless of how many mahogany accents and smart appliances you cram inside. But it beats spreadsheets and fluorescent lighting. My remote consulting business keeps me financially afloat. Companies still want their data analyzed, they just don't need me in their office to do it. This arrangement allows me to chase the ideal balance of solitude and connectivity, parking my portable office wherever the Wi-Fi is strong and the views are worth waking up to. I'm not one of those #Vanlife influencers with suspiciously white teeth and carefully staged morning coffee shots. My followers are modest in number, but genuine in their interest in sustainable mobile living. October found me heading towards Central Ohio, chasing ideal fall foliage for my quarterly newsletter. A fellow Vanlifer had recommended a region called Hocking Hills for its dramatic cliffs and waterfalls. As I drove through winding back roads, the GPS directed me toward a small town called Whitewood as the last stop for supplies before entering more remote areas. Whitewood appeared frozen in time, a single main street flanked by brick buildings with faded signage and dusty windows. American flags hung from lampposts alongside banners announcing a heritage festival that, according to the dates, had occurred 3 weeks prior. The few pedestrians visible moved with the unhurried pace of people for whom time was an abundant resource. I parked outside a general store whose hand-painted sign promised everything you need and some of what you want. A bell jingled as I entered, announcing my presence to the thin, elderly man behind the counter. His eyes, magnified by thick glasses, assessed me with undisguised curiosity. "Afternoon," I offered, grabbing a basket and moving toward the canned goods. He replied with a non-committal grunt, his gaze following me as I navigated the narrow aisles. The store was surprisingly well-stocked, offering essentials alongside locally produced items: honey, preserves, handcrafted soaps, all labeled with the same Whitewood Heritage brand. As I browsed, a group of men entered the store, their conversation dying immediately when they noticed me. There were 4 of them, ranging in age from perhaps 30 to 60, all wearing similar work clothes and weathered expressions. The oldest, a barrel-chested man with a silver beard and calloused hands, approached the counter while the others strategically positioned themselves throughout the small store, effectively surrounding me. "Marshall," the bearded man addressed the shopkeeper. "Who's your visitor?" The shopkeeper, Marshall, apparently shrugged. "Just came in, driving one of them camper vans." The way he said it made my lifestyle sound like a questionable life choice at best, a moral failing at worst. I continued selecting items, pretending not to notice the tension, though my heartbeat had accelerated noticeably. When I approached the counter to pay, the bearded man remained planted beside it, forcing me to acknowledge him. "Passing through?" he asked, his tone making it sound more like a suggestion than a question. "Planning to stay a few days in Hocking Hills," I replied evenly. "Heard it's beautiful this time of year." His expression remained neutral, but something hardened in his eyes. "It is, though there are better places to base yourself than around here. Logan's got proper campgrounds, amenities for tourists." Again, not a suggestion but a directive. "I appreciate the tip," I said, handing cash to Marshall. "But I prefer quieter spots. I work remotely and need some peace." "Work?" one of the younger men asked sharply. "What kind of work brings you to Whitewood?" Before I could answer, the door chimed again. A woman entered, perhaps 50, with practical clothes and prematurely gray hair cut in a severe bob. The men's postures shifted subtly at her arrival, a nearly imperceptible relaxation. "Mayor Blackwood," Marshall nodded deferentially. She scanned the scene quickly, her sharp eyes taking in the positions of the men and my obvious outsider status. "Gentlemen," she acknowledged, then turned to me with a practiced smile that never reached her eyes. "Welcome to Whitewood. I don't believe we've had the pleasure." "Just passing through," I said, adopting their apparent preference for brevity. "Ezra Caldwell." "Diana Blackwood," she replied. "Mayor, as you may have gathered, we don't get many visitors this time of year. What brings you to our little corner of Ohio?" Something about her presence commanded honesty. "I'm a remote consultant. I live in my van and travel while working. I was heading to Hocking Hills for the scenery." She nodded thoughtfully. "How interesting. Though if you're looking for a place to park overnight, I'm afraid Whitewood has ordinances against unauthorized camping. Safety concerns, you understand." "Of course," I replied, gathering my purchases. I wasn't planning to stay in town. "Good." Her smile remained fixed. "The hills can be dangerous if you don't know them. Easy to get lost. Cell reception is spotty at best." She reached into her pocket and extracted a business card. My number, should you need any local assistance. I accepted it, noting the card contained only her name and number, no email, no office address. Appreciate it. As I walked toward the door, Diana called after me. Mr. Caldwell? One last thing. I turned to find all eyes still fixed on me. The annual Founders' Day celebration begins tomorrow. The forest preserve will be closed to visitors. For your safety, I recommend moving on to Hocking Hills proper by nightfall. The message couldn't have been clearer. Leave, and leave quickly. As I exited the store, the weight of their collective gaze followed me like a physical pressure. I climbed into my van, stowed my groceries, and checked the time. 3:47 p.m. Plenty of daylight left to find a spot outside Whitewood's jurisdiction. I drove slowly through town, noting how pedestrians stopped to watch my passage. In my rearview mirror, I saw Mayor Blackwood and the bearded man emerge from the store, deep in conversation while tracking my van with their eyes. The sensation of being unwelcome wasn't new. Many small towns viewed outsiders with suspicion, but something about Whitewood's hostility felt orchestrated rather than instinctive. As the buildings thinned and forest thickened around the road, I tried to dismiss my unease as overactive imagination. But the mayor's warning echoed in my mind as the trees closed in around me. The hills can be dangerous if you don't know them. What I didn't yet realize was just how dangerous they could be, and that the real threat wasn't getting lost in the forest, but being found by those who called it home. The road leading out of Whitewood curved through increasingly dense forest, afternoon sunlight filtering through the canopy in dappled patterns. My GPS indicated I was entering the northern boundary of Wayne National Forest, though no official signage marked the transition. According to my research, this area contained numerous fire roads and unofficial camping spots favored by hunters and locals, perfect for an inconspicuous overnight stay before continuing to Hocking Hills in the morning. I turned onto a promising gravel road, following it for about 2 miles until I found a small clearing beside a seasonal stream, now mostly dry, with just a trickle of water among the rocks. The spot was ideal, level ground, no visible no trespassing signs, and far enough from the main road to avoid casual discovery. I positioned my van for a quick exit if needed, an old habit that had served me well in my months on the road. After setting up my portable solar panel and workstation, I attempted to check emails. As Mayor Blackwood had warned, cell reception was minimal, a single fluctuating bar that allowed text messages, but nothing more data-intensive. Sufficient for emergency contact, at least. I'd have to wait until tomorrow to handle work matters. The afternoon passed peacefully as I hiked along the stream bed, photographing interesting rock formations and the vibrant fall foliage. The forest was eerily quiet, lacking the usual sounds of birds and small animals. I attributed this to the approaching evening and returned to my van as shadows lengthened, preparing a simple dinner on my portable stove. As darkness fell, I noticed small flickers of light deep in the forest, too steady for fireflies, too erratic for flashlights. Curious, I checked my Ohio Trail Map app, which showed no marked campgrounds or cabins in that direction. Perhaps locals with hunting camps not recorded on official maps? While washing my dinner dishes, I froze at the distinct sound of a branch snapping nearby, the unmistakable noise of something large moving through the undergrowth. I scanned the tree line with my flashlight, but saw nothing. The sound was not repeated, yet the sensation of being watched intensified. Sleep came fitfully that night, interrupted by distant sounds that might have been voices or might have been the wind. Near dawn, I jerked awake to a rhythmic thumping against my van's exterior, subtle but deliberate. Heart racing, I peered through the blackout curtains, but could see nothing in the pre-dawn darkness. When I finally worked up the courage to open the door, I found only stillness and silence, the forest shrouded in heavy mist. The only evidence of nocturnal visitors was a crude symbol drawn in the dirt near my front tire, 3 interconnected circles with a line bisecting them. I photographed the symbol before erasing it with my boot, telling myself it was probably teenagers playing pranks on the out-of-towner. Still, I decided to relocate. Founders' Day celebration or not, I'd rather deal with the official restrictions of Hocking Hills than the uneasy wilderness around Whitewood. As I prepared to leave, my phone chimed with an incoming text, surprising given the poor reception. It was from an unknown number, Founders' blood runs deep. Outsiders drain easily. I dropped the phone as if it had burned me, then picked it up with trembling fingers to block the number. Another text arrived immediately from a different number. "We see you." Then another, "The forest watches," each from a different sender. I threw the phone onto the passenger seat, completed my departure preparations in record time, and started the engine. The van refused to move. Checking outside, I discovered all 4 tires had been silently slashed during the night. Not randomly punctured, but carefully cut in identical patterns that matched the symbol drawn in the dirt. Panic rising, I retreated inside, locking the doors and taking inventory of my situation. No vehicle, minimal phone service, and at least 5 miles to the nearest main road. I had sufficient food and water for several days, solar power for basic electricity, and a location shareable with emergency services if necessary. The rational response would be to call for roadside assistance or even police. I dialed 911, but the call failed to connect. Regular calls to local towing services also failed. Text messages to friends showing my location and predicament showed as sending, but never delivered. It was as if my clearing had become a dead zone overnight, though I'd had enough service for those threatening texts to reach me. As I weighed my options, movement at the forest edge caught my attention. A figure stood partially concealed behind a large oak, motionless, watching. When I raised my camera to zoom in for a better look, the figure retreated deeper into the trees. I caught only a glimpse of dark clothing and what appeared to be something covering the face. My choices were clear: wait for help that might never arrive, or hike out to the main road and seek assistance. Neither option appealed, but staying put made me an easy target for whoever was toying with me. I packed a day bag with essentials, water, energy bars, first aid kit, multi-tool, flashlight, and extra layers, and prepared to hike out. As I locked my van, a voice called from the trees, a woman's voice, young and urgent. "Not that way." I spun toward the sound, but saw no one. "The road is watched," the voice continued. "Follow the stream bed east. Hurry." "Who's there?" I called, scanning the tree line. "Show yourself." A figure emerged partially from behind a distant tree, a young woman with dirty blonde hair pulled back in a practical braid. She appeared to be in her 20s, dressed in hiking clothes that had seen better days. "There's no time," she insisted. "They'll be coming to check on you soon. The slashed tires are part of the ritual. They're marking you as a potential offering." "Offering? What the hell are you talking about?" I demanded, even as her words sent a chill through me. "Founders Day," she replied, as if that explained everything. "Please, if you want to live, follow the stream east. I'll meet you at the Lightning Oak." Without waiting for my response, she disappeared back into the forest. I stood frozen, weighing impossible options. Follow a mysterious stranger into the woods, or wait for the return of people who had vandalized my vehicle and sent threatening messages. As I deliberated, a distant engine sound made the decision for me. Someone was coming up the gravel road. Grabbing my pack, I plunged into the forest, following the nearly dry stream bed eastward as instructed. Behind me, I heard vehicles arriving at my clearing, followed by male voices calling to each other as they discovered my abandoned van. One voice rose above the others, authoritative, angry. "Find him. The choosing is tonight, and the founders won't be denied." I increased my pace, stumbling over rocks and down branches as I fled deeper into the forest, away from the voices but toward uncertainties that might prove equally dangerous. The stream bed curved ahead, disappearing around a bend where an enormous lightning-scarred oak stood sentinel. As I approached, the young woman stepped out from behind it, finger to her lips in the universal signal for silence. "Quickly," she whispered, gesturing toward a nearly invisible gap in the rocks beside the stream. "They'll bring dogs soon. We need to mask your scent." Without fully understanding why, I found myself trusting her. Perhaps it was the genuine fear in her eyes, or perhaps simply the absence of better options. Either way, I followed her into the narrow crevice, unaware that I was stepping from one danger into another, and that Whitewood's Founders Day celebration was about to reveal horrors no travel blog had ever mentioned. The gap in the rocks led to a narrow tunnel that forced us to proceed in single file, crouching to avoid the low ceiling. My mysterious guide moved with practiced ease, navigating the darkness with minimal use of her small flashlight. I followed clumsily, grateful for the helmet-style headlamp I'd packed, though she repeatedly hissed at me to dim it. They know about most of these passages, she explained in hushed tones. But they don't know all of them. Not the ones we've found. I whispered back. She didn't answer immediately, focusing on a junction where our path split 3 ways. After a moment's consideration, she chose the rightmost tunnel. Others who escaped, she finally said. Or tried to. The passage gradually widened until we emerged into what appeared to be an old mining cavern, support beams rotting, but still holding the ceiling at bay. Battery-powered lanterns revealed basic survival supplies arranged around the space: sleeping bags, water containers, canned food. 3 other people occupied the cavern: an elderly man with a wild gray beard, a middle-aged woman whose right arm ended at the elbow, and a teenage boy who watched me with undisguised suspicion. "This is Ezra," my guide announced. "He was marked this morning. Tire slashing pattern confirms they selected him for the offering." The older man nodded grimly. Just in time, Naomi. The choosers were already on their route. He extended a gnarled hand to me. "Wilson Hayes, former County Historical Society," before I asked too many questions about Whitewood's founding families. "I don't understand what's happening," I said, shaking his hand tentatively. "What's this offering you keep mentioning? Why did they target me?" The one-armed woman approached, her eyes evaluating me with clinical detachment. "I'm Rebecca," she introduced herself. "Former nurse at Whitewood Regional. You fit the profile. Healthy, alone, no local connections, unlikely to be immediately missed. They prefer travelers for the offering. Fewer complications." "Offering for what?" I pressed, growing frustrated with their cryptic explanations. Wilson gestured to a makeshift table where maps and old documents were spread out. Whitewood was founded in 1802 by 7 families who fled accusations of witchcraft in New England. They established a community here based on their particular beliefs, a blend of Puritan structure and pagan rituals that would have gotten them burned anywhere civilization had a foothold. He pointed to a faded daguerreotype showing stern-faced men and women standing before a crude stone altar. The founding families believed they made a covenant with the forest itself, or rather, with something that dwelled within it. Protection and prosperity in exchange for regular tribute. Human tribute, Naomi added quietly. The Founders' Day celebration isn't about historical remembrance. It's a sacrifice. I stared at them, waiting for someone to crack a smile, to reveal this as an elaborate prank or delusion. No one did. "You're seriously telling me this town kidnaps people for human sacrifice? In 2024? And no one has noticed?" "People notice," Rebecca said bitterly, rubbing her missing forearm. "But investigations disappear, just like the victims. The founding families control everything in 3 counties: law enforcement, judges, medical examiners. When outsiders do investigate, they either join the conspiracy or become part of the offering themselves." "I was a journalist." The teenage boy spoke for the first time, his voice cracking slightly. "Well, journalism student working on a story about missing hikers in Wayne National Forest. Patterns going back decades, always around the same time in October." He gave a hollow laugh. "Thought I'd make my career with an expose. Now I'm just trying to stay alive." My mind reeled, attempting to reconcile their outlandish claims with the undeniably threatening behavior I'd experienced. If this has been happening for generations, why hasn't anyone stopped it? Wilson spread his hands in a gesture of futility. "The covenant works, as far as they're concerned. Whitewood thrives while surrounding communities wither. No natural disasters touch them. No economic hardship affects them. Even COVID barely registered here. The founding families believe absolute security requires absolute loyalty to the covenant." "And you?" I asked, looking at each of them. "How did you escape becoming offerings?" "I didn't entirely," Rebecca said, raising her partial arm. "This was payment for my interference when I discovered what they were doing to patients in the hospital basement. I escaped during the amputation. They assumed I'd bleed out in the forest." Her clinical detachment cracked, revealing deep trauma beneath. "I found Wilson instead. I've been hiding for 3 years," Wilson continued, "documenting everything, trying to find a way to expose them that won't be covered up or dismissed as conspiracy theory." Naomi, who had been watching the tunnel entrance, rejoined the conversation. "We need to move soon. They'll expand their search when they don't find you near your van." "How do you know so much about their methods?" I asked her, A shadow crossed her face. My family name is Blackwood. The mayor is my aunt. She met my startled expression with defiance. I was being groomed to take a leadership role in the traditions. When I discovered what that actually meant, I tried to run. That was 2 years ago. The implications hit me with physical force. The mayor, she gave me her card, insisted I call if I needed help. Standard procedure, Wilson nodded. They mark potential offerings, then offer assistance that leads them directly to the ritual site. Did she touch you when she gave you the card? I thought back to our interaction. No, but one of the men in the store bumped into me. Seemed deliberate at the time. Blood trace, Rebecca said matter-of-factly. They need a small sample to determine compatibility with the ritual. A pin in their ring, usually, barely noticeable. I instinctively checked my arms, finding a tiny red mark on my left forearm I hadn't noticed before. This is insane, I whispered, the reality of my situation finally sinking in. We need to call for help, get state police involved. With what evidence? Wilson asked bitterly. I've tried. Without photos of the actual ritual, no one believes it's anything more than a peculiar local festival with some overzealous participants. Then we get evidence, I said, an idea forming. My van has cameras, external security cameras that activate with motion and upload to cloud storage when there's service. If they're searching my van right now, I might have footage. For the first time, a spark of hope appeared in Wilson's eyes. Can you access the footage remotely? I pulled out my phone, unsurprised to find no service in the cavern. Not from here, but if we could get to a location with reception. There's a fire tower about 3 miles northeast, Naomi said. It usually has service, but getting there means crossing paths they actively patrol, especially today. It's worth the risk, the journalism student insisted. If we can get solid evidence out to multiple news outlets simultaneously, they can't cover it all up. Rebecca looked skeptical. Even with evidence, help wouldn't arrive in time to stop tonight's ritual. The choosing happens at sunset, the offering at midnight. Then we stop it ourselves, I said with more confidence than I felt. But first, we need that footage. If something happens to us, at least the truth gets out. Naomi and Wilson exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. Finally, Wilson nodded. We've been hiding too long. Perhaps it's time to fight back. As we gathered supplies and prepared to move, I examined the maps on the table more closely. They showed not only the tunnel system we were using, but also the layout of what appeared to be ancient stone structures deep in the forest, structures that predated Whitewood itself. What are these? I asked, pointing to the largest formation marked with the same 3-circle symbol I'd found by my tire. The founders call it the Covenant Stone, Naomi replied quietly. It's where they perform the ritual, where they believe the forest spirit accepts their offering. Her voice dropped even lower. Where I was supposed to assist in my first ceremony before I ran. And you actually saw this ritual? I asked, dreading the answer. Her eyes met mine, haunted by memories too terrible to voice completely. I saw enough to know we can't let them capture you. Death would be the merciful outcome. She shouldered her pack, visibly steeling herself. We should move now while there's still daylight. The search patterns will be predictable until sunset. After that, she didn't finish the thought. As we prepared to enter the tunnels again, I tried to process everything I'd learned. Just hours ago, my biggest concern had been finding good Wi-Fi for a video conference. Now I was hiding from an entire town of cultists who wanted to sacrifice me as part of some arcane ritual. Part of me still hoped this would prove to be an elaborate misunderstanding or mass delusion. That hope died as we reached a junction in the tunnel, and Naomi froze, raising her hand for silence. From a passage to our left came the unmistakable sound of voices, male, authoritative, and much too close. Among them, I recognized the distinct tone of Mayor Blackwood, her words chilling me to the core. The founders are restless. This offering must proceed without fail. Find the outsider, and any who shelter him. The covenant must be honored, whatever the cost. Heavy footsteps approached our position, accompanied by the panting of what could only be tracking dogs. Our escape route was compromised. The hunt had intensified, and we were running out of both options and time. Founders' Day was upon us, and Whitewood would have its offering, unless we could find a way to break a covenant that had endured for over 2 centuries. This way, Naomi mouthed silently, pulling us into a narrow offshoot of the tunnel I hadn't noticed. We squeezed through the tight passage single file, the sounds of pursuit growing louder behind us. The dog's excited barking echoed through the stone corridors, bouncing in ways that made it impossible to determine their exact location. The passage narrowed further until we were forced to crawl on our bellies, dragging our packs behind us. Just as the claustrophobia threatened to overwhelm me, the tunnel opened into a vertical shaft with crude handholds carved into the rock. Naomi was already climbing, gesturing urgently for us to follow. "They've never found this exit," she whispered as I began to climb. "It comes up inside a hollow tree about half a mile from the fire tower." The climb was treacherous, the handholds slick with moisture, the shaft occasionally narrowing to barely accommodating width. After what felt like an eternity of upward progress, I saw daylight filtering down from above. Naomi had already disappeared through the opening. One by one, we emerged into the base of an enormous hollow oak, its interior blackened by some long-ago lightning strike, but its outer shell still very much alive with autumn foliage. Through gaps in the trunk, I could see we were on a ridgeline overlooking a valley, the forest stretching in all directions. In the distance, the metal framework of a fire observation tower rose above the canopy. "We need to move quickly," Wilson said, orienting himself with a small compass. "They'll realize we've left the tunnel system soon enough." Rebecca distributed what looked like homemade smoke bombs from her pack. "These might help confuse the dogs if they pick up our trail," she explained, handing me 2 of the devices. "Pull the string, count to 3, then drop it." We set off through the forest, moving as quietly as possible while maintaining a brisk pace. The journalist student, who had finally introduced himself as Ethan, took point with Naomi, their younger eyes scanning for patrols or trail cameras. Rebecca and Wilson flanked me, constantly checking our back trail for signs of pursuit. About halfway to the tower, Ethan froze, signaling for us to take cover. Through the trees ahead, 2 figures in what appeared to be game warden uniforms moved methodically across our path, accompanied by a German shepherd straining at its leash. We huddled behind a fallen log, barely breathing as they passed within 30 yards of our position. "Not real wardens," Wilson whispered once they were out of earshot. "Whitewood security dressed to avoid suspicion from any actual hikers they might encounter." We altered our course slightly, giving their patrol route a wide berth. After another tense half-hour of careful movement, the fire tower loomed directly ahead, a skeletal metal structure rising approximately 80 feet above a small clearing. No one appeared to be guarding it. "Seems too easy," Rebecca murmured, scanning the surrounding forest with narrowed eyes. "Maybe they don't expect anyone to come this way," I suggested hopefully. "They're focused on the tunnels and roads." Naomi shook her head. "They know every approach to anything useful. There's either a trap or they want someone to reach it," Wilson finished grimly. "To call for help that will never arrive, but will reveal their position." We debated briefly before deciding we had no choice. The potential value of the camera footage outweighed the risk. I would climb the tower alone to check for reception, while the others maintained watch from different positions around the clearing. If trouble appeared, we would use the smoke bombs to create confusion and retreat to a predetermined rally point deeper in the forest. The tower's metal stairs creaked alarmingly as I ascended, each sound amplified in the quiet forest. At the top platform, I crouched below the railing and checked my phone. 2 bars of service, weak but present. I quickly navigated to my security app and authenticated with shaking fingers. To my immense relief, the cameras had indeed captured footage. Several files awaited download, but with the poor connection, each would take precious minutes. I started the largest file downloading and scanned the surrounding forest while I waited. From this height, the scale of Whitewood's territory became apparent. What had seemed like unbroken wilderness actually contained subtle signs of human presence. Narrow trails, small clearings, and in the distance, what appeared to be stone structures partially reclaimed by vegetation. Movement below caught my attention. A vehicle was approaching on a barely visible fire road, not from the direction of Whitewood, but from deeper in the forest. I ducked lower, watching as a black SUV with tinted windows stopped at the base of the tower. 2 men emerged, both carrying rifles, followed by Mayor Blackwood herself. I texted the others a warning. "Trap. Mayor here. 2 armed men." Then I silenced my phone completely, praying the others would see the message before revealing themselves. The download showed 67% complete, still minutes away from finishing. The mayor's voice carried clearly in the still air. "We know you're up there, Mr. Caldwell. There's no point in hiding." She sounded almost conversational, as if we were meeting for coffee rather than engaged in a deadly game of cat and mouse. "Your friends have already been located. Cooperation now will make things easier for everyone." I remained frozen, unsure if she was bluffing about capturing the others. The download crept to 72%. "The choosing cannot be prevented," she continued. "It's been part of Whitewood since before there was a Whitewood, before there was an Ohio. The land requires balance. Prosperity demands payment." One of the armed men began climbing the tower stairs, his boots creating rhythmic metallic clangs that sent vibrations through the entire structure. The download reached 85%. In desperate inspiration, I activated an emergency feature of my van's security system, a piercing alarm and strobe lights designed to deter thieves. If my van was still where I'd left it, the sudden activation might draw away some of the searchers or at least cause confusion. The mayor's radio crackled with urgent voices. After a brief conversation, she called up to her approaching enforcer, "Stand down. We have a situation at the primary site." To my astonishment, the man reversed course, descending quickly to rejoin her. Within moments, they had returned to the SUV and departed, leaving me trembling with adrenaline and confusion. The download completed at 93%, not the entire file, but hopefully enough. I quickly scanned the surrounding forest for any sign of my companions. Movement at the northwestern edge of the clearing caught my eye. Naomi, signaling from partial cover. The others gradually emerged from different positions, converging cautiously on the tower. I descended on unsteady legs, clutching my phone like a lifeline. "I got most of the footage," I announced as I reached them. "But they knew we were coming here. Something called them away. Maybe my alarm activation worked as a distraction. Or maybe they want us to think we've escaped," Rebecca cautioned. "Keep us running until we're exhausted before the real capture." Wilson checked his watch. "Nearly 4 o'clock. They'll begin the choosing preparations soon. We need to see that footage and decide our next move." We retreated to a dense thicket about a quarter-mile from the tower, forming a tight circle around my phone. The video began with Whitewood's search party arriving at my abandoned van. Mayor Blackwood directed operations with clinical precision, ordering teams to spread out in search patterns while others examined my vehicle. They removed items seemingly at random: my coffee mug, a hairbrush, a used napkin, placing each in separate evidence bags. "DNA samples," Rebecca murmured, "for the compatibility ritual." The footage continued, showing the search party departing but leaving 2 men behind. They performed what could only be described as a ritual around my van, drawing symbols in dirt, chanting in low voices, and finally slaughtering what appeared to be a small rabbit, using its blood to mark the van's doors. "The marking," Naomi whispered, her face pale. "They've designated your van as the vessel for transportation to the Covenant Stone." The video ended abruptly, the incomplete download cutting off what happened next. But it was enough to confirm everything they had told me. This wasn't mass delusion or elaborate fiction. Whitewood was indeed preparing for some kind of sacrificial ritual, and I was meant to be the centerpiece. "We need to get this to the authorities," I insisted, trying to attach the video to an email. The weak signal made the process agonizingly slow. "It won't arrive in time," Wilson said, checking his watch again. "And even if it does, do you think a single video will mobilize a police response before midnight? They'll investigate tomorrow, after it's too late. Then what do we do?" I demanded, frustration and fear making my voice crack. Naomi had been examining the maps, her expression shifting from resignation to calculation. "We can't stop the ritual preparations," she said slowly. "But we might be able to disrupt the ritual itself." She pointed to the stone formation marked as the Covenant Stone. "I know how the ceremony works. What the founding families don't know is that I've studied their own texts more thoroughly than they have." "What do you mean?" Ethan asked. "The Covenant demands balance," she explained. "The original agreement wasn't about sacrifice, it was about exchange. Somewhere through the generations, the founding families twisted the interpretation to maintain their power." Her finger traced a path through the forest. "There's another approach to the Covenant Stone, one not watched because it's considered inauspicious to enter from the western face. You're suggesting we interrupt a human sacrifice ritual performed by an entire town of cultists? Rebecca asked incredulously. That's suicide. Not interrupt, Naomi corrected. Complete, but properly. The true covenant demands willing participation, not forced sacrifice. She looked directly at me. It's risky, but if I can invoke the original terms while they're in the middle of the ritual, it might work. Wilson shook his head. Even if your interpretation is correct, they'll kill us before we can interfere. Not if they're already in the sacred state, Naomi countered. Once the ritual begins, violence from the participants invalidates the covenant. They know this. It's why they subdue their victims beforehand. A heavy silence fell over our group as we considered the audacity of Naomi's plan. It relied on religious interpretations of an ancient covenant that might not even exist in any meaningful way. Yet the footage proved the townspeople certainly believed in it with deadly seriousness. It's better than waiting to be hunted down, Ethan finally said. And if we're going to die anyway, I'd rather do it trying to save someone else. Rebecca and Wilson exchanged glances, years of survival in this nightmare clearly weighing on them. We've been hiding for so long, Rebecca said finally. Maybe it's time we stood and fought. Wilson nodded, his weathered face resolute. If not us, who? If not now, when? With our decision made, we spent the remaining daylight preparing. Naomi sketched the layout of the Covenant Stone from memory, marking patrol routes and ritual positions. The founding families would gather in concentric circles around the central altar, with the 7 primary families, including the Blackwoods, forming the innermost ring. The mayor will lead the ritual, Naomi explained. As the current Blackwood matriarch, she serves as the voice of the covenant. The offering, you, Ezra, would be placed on the central stone after the choosing ceremony confirms your compatibility. What exactly is the choosing? I asked, dreading the answer. Blood alchemy, she replied grimly. They combine your samples with elements from the forest to ensure you'll be an acceptable offering. The mixture changes color if you're compatible, turns deep crimson instead of black. As dusk approached, we moved through the forest toward the western approach to the Covenant Stone. The distant sounds of vehicles and voices indicated the town was mobilizing for their ceremony, but this side of the ritual site remained unguarded, just as Naomi had predicted. We reached a vantage point overlooking the clearing as the last light faded from the sky. Below us, lanterns illuminated a massive stone formation, 3 rough monoliths forming a circle around a central altar stone, bisected by a natural crevice that ran through the earth, exactly like the symbol they'd drawn by my tire. Whitewood residents were arriving in groups, arranging themselves in the predetermined circles. I recognized faces from the general store among them. Children were present too, being instructed in their positions by elders, the next generation being groomed in the tradition. They're all complicit, I whispered, appalled. Most don't know the full truth, Naomi countered. They're told the ritual is symbolic, that no real harm comes to the offering. Only the inner circle witnesses the actual sacrifice. Mayor Blackwood arrived last, wearing ceremonial robes adorned with symbols matching those I'd seen in the video. She carried an ornate wooden box to the altar stone and began the ceremony, her voice carrying clearly in the night air. Founders and forest, blood and stone, we honor the covenant that sustains us. The assembled townspeople responded in unison. The covenant endures. A procession of 7 representatives, 1 from each founding family, approached the altar, each carrying items I recognized from my van. My stomach lurched when I realized these were the personal items taken for DNA sampling. The choosing begins, Naomi whispered. When they complete the ritual mixture, we must move quickly. Mayor Blackwood opened the wooden box, revealing vials of dark liquid and various natural elements, soil, pine resin, water from some sacred source. With practiced precision, she combined these with my stolen personal items in a stone bowl. Witness the choosing, she intoned, lifting the bowl. May the covenant reveal its will. The mixture in the bowl began to change color, shifting from black to deep crimson as the crowd murmured in approval. The offering is accepted, Mayor Blackwood announced. Bring forth the vessel. 2 men I recognized from the general store stepped forward, holding between them a bound figure with a hood over their head. My blood ran cold. They had captured someone else to substitute for me. That wasn't part of the plan, Wilson hissed. "Who was that?" As if in answer, the hood was removed, revealing Ethan's bruised face. He must have been captured during our earlier escape without us realizing. "Change of plans," I said, heart racing. "We move now." Before the others could stop me, I stepped out from our hiding place and shouted, "The offering rejects your interpretation of the covenant." All heads turned toward me. Mayor Blackwood's face contorted with shock and rage. "Seize him," she commanded, but Naomi emerged beside me, her voice ringing with authority. "Witness the true descendant of the Blackwood line," she called out. I challenged the corruption of the covenant. A murmur ran through the crowd. Many clearly recognized Naomi, and her appearance had thrown the ceremony into confusion. The original covenant was never about unwilling sacrifice, Naomi continued, advancing toward the central circle with remarkable confidence. I followed close behind her, while Rebecca and Wilson circled to reach Ethan. It was about willing exchange, balance freely given, not forcibly taken. "Blasphemy," Mayor Blackwood spat. "Seize them all." But something strange was happening. The crimson mixture in the stone bowl had begun to glow with unnatural light. The bisecting crevice in the central altar stone likewise illuminated from within. "The covenant responds to truth," Naomi shouted over the growing chaos. "I invoke the original terms by right of blood and knowledge." She approached the altar and, before anyone could stop her, cut her palm with a small knife and let her blood fall into the glowing crevice. "I offer myself willingly in exchange for protection and prosperity, not as sacrifice, but as guardian." The effect was immediate and terrifying. The ground trembled beneath our feet. The crimson mixture shattered its container, splashing across the altar stone and flowing like liquid fire into the crevice. Wind whipped through the clearing, extinguishing lanterns and plunging the gathering into darkness broken only by the eerie glow from the altar. A voice that seemed to emanate from the stone itself, neither male nor female, neither young nor old, filled the clearing. "The true covenant is remembered. The false servants are rejected." Panic erupted among the townspeople. Many fled into the forest, while the inner circle, the representatives of the founding families, found themselves unable to move, rooted to the ground as if the earth itself held them. Mayor Blackwood's face contorted with fury and fear. "This isn't possible. The sacrifice must be completed." "It is being completed," Naomi replied calmly, her hand still bleeding into the crevice. But the forest never demanded death. It demanded stewardship and respect. The original covenant was perverted by those who sought power, not partnership. The glowing energy from the crevice began to envelop Naomi, spiraling around her like luminous vines. Far from harming her, it seemed to strengthen her, her posture straightening as years of fear fell away. I had managed to reach Ethan and was cutting his bonds when Mayor Blackwood broke free of whatever force had been holding her. With a feral cry, she lunged toward Naomi with a ceremonial dagger. Without thinking, I threw myself between them. The blade sliced across my shoulder instead of finding Naomi's heart. My blood spilled onto the altar beside hers. "Willing blood freely given," the voice from the stone intoned. "The covenant is renewed." The light from the crevice intensified unbearably. When my vision cleared, Mayor Blackwood and the other inner circle members had collapsed to the ground, unconscious but alive. The remaining townspeople had fled or stood frozen in shock at the edge of the clearing. Naomi helped me to my feet, her eyes filled with wonder and determination. "The true covenant is restored," she said quietly. "The forest accepts our guardianship in exchange for its protection." "What exactly does that mean?" I asked, clutching my wounded shoulder. "It means Whitewood's dark secret is broken," she replied. "The founding family's power is ended, and the forest has new guardians." Rebecca had managed to free Ethan completely. Wilson stood nearby, already documenting everything with his camera. "We need to get this footage out immediately," he said, "before they can regroup or create a cover story." Dawn found us at the fire tower, uploading multiple accounts and evidence to news outlets, law enforcement agencies, and social media platforms. My security footage, combined with Wilson's documentation of the ritual and its supernatural conclusion, created an undeniable record of Whitewood's centuries of darkness. State police arrived by mid-morning, responding to the flood of evidence and reports. They found Mayor Blackwood and the other founding family representatives still at the Covenant Stone, unable to explain their ceremonial garb or the evidence surrounding them. The investigation that followed uncovered generations of missing persons cases connected to Whitewood's annual celebration. Hidden graves, records of previous offerings, and testimonies from town residents who had been kept ignorant of the true nature of their traditions created a case that couldn't be buried or dismissed. 1 month later, I sat with Naomi on the hood of my newly repaired van, watching the sunset over the forest that had nearly claimed my life. "What will you do now?" I asked her. The events at the Covenant Stone had changed her. There was a gravity to her presence that hadn't been there before, a connection to the land that seemed almost palpable. "Stay," she said simply. "The Covenant is real, Ezra. Not the perverted sacrifice the founding families created, but the true bargain, stewardship in exchange for protection. Someone needs to maintain that balance." "And the others?" "Wilson is working with investigators, finally getting the recognition his research deserves. Rebecca is helping the townspeople process what happened. Many were genuinely ignorant of the truth and are struggling with their unwitting complicity. Ethan got his story, though I don't think any journalism school prepared him for that kind of scoop." I nodded, considering my own path forward. My van was repaired, the open road still called, yet something about this place and these people had changed me too. "You could stay," Naomi suggested quietly, reading my thoughts. "The forest might need more than one guardian." I looked out over the autumn landscape, the trees now seeming less threatening and more like silent witnesses to centuries of darkness and, finally, renewal. "Maybe I will," I replied, feeling the weight of my decision. "At least for a while." Above us, a flock of birds took flight from the canopy, wheeling against the darkening sky in perfect formation. Whether by coincidence or design, they traced the pattern I now recognized. 3 circles, bisected by a line, no longer a mark of impending sacrifice, but a symbol of covenant renewed, of balance restored. The forest watched, but now with protection rather than hunger in its gaze. Whitewood would begin again, its foundations rebuilt on truth rather than blood. And I, who had come seeking only autumn foliage for my newsletter, had found something I never expected, a purpose, a community, and perhaps, as Naomi's hand found mine in the gathering darkness, something more. My name is Adrian Mercer, 29 years old, and Denver is where I officially reside, though my parents still keep my childhood bedroom intact. 4 months ago, I traded my unfulfilling job as a veterinary assistant for a nomadic existence in my lovingly converted 2012 Ford Transit. The van represents everything my structured, predictable life in Colorado wasn't. Freedom, spontaneity, and just enough uncertainty to keep me awake. Instagram makes #Vanlife look like an endless stream of sunsets and coffee with mountain backdrops. The reality includes hunting for public restrooms at 2 a.m. and defrosting your toothpaste on winter mornings. Still, I wouldn't trade it for anything. My small photography business, primarily selling prints online and occasionally booking portrait sessions in cities I pass through, keeps gas in the tank and food in my compact refrigerator. I'd been zigzagging across the country for months when I decided to explore the Midwest, a region I'd overlooked in my travels. Ohio seemed like a good starting point, with its mix of forests, lakes, and small towns that time forgot. My research led me to Ravenwood, a tiny dot on the map nestled against the edge of Wayne National Forest. Online forums mentioned a picturesque reservoir nearby with unofficial overnight parking that local authorities typically overlooked. The drive into Ravenwood felt like traveling backward through time. Faded storefronts with hand-painted signs lined the main street, American flags hanging limply from telephone poles. A group of men sitting outside the local hardware store tracked my van with their eyes as I passed. I offered a friendly wave, but none returned the gesture. Just another reminder that my California license plates marked me as an outsider. I stopped at a small market to pick up supplies, conscious of the curious glances from the cashier, a woman in her 50s with hard eyes and a tight smile. "Just passing through," she asked, scanning my items with deliberate slowness. There was an edge to her question that seemed to demand justification for my presence. Planning to stay a few days, actually. I replied, trying to sound casual. I heard the reservoir is beautiful. Thought I'd get some photographs while I'm here. Her smile remained fixed, but something flickered behind her eyes. It is pretty out there. Real isolated, though. Cell service is spotty at best. She paused before adding, might be better accommodations in Athens. Only about an hour away. The suggestion was clear. I wasn't welcome to stay. But I'd encountered small-town wariness before, and it usually faded once people realized I wasn't a threat. I thanked her for the suggestion and paid for my groceries, determined to find my spot by the reservoir before sunset. Following directions from a travel blog, I drove down increasingly narrow roads until pavement gave way to gravel. The forest pressed in from both sides, branches occasionally scraping against my van's sides. Just as I began to wonder if I'd missed a turn, the trees opened up to reveal the glittering expanse of water, golden in the late afternoon sun. Perfect. I parked in a small clearing overlooking the reservoir, careful to position myself away from the official "no overnight parking" sign while maintaining a clear exit path, a habit that had served me well in my months on the road. As I set up my camp chair to watch the sunset, I couldn't shake the feeling that the peaceful scene before me was somehow watching back. I dismissed it as paranoia triggered by the unwelcoming town, unaware that by morning, I would desperately wish I'd heeded the cashier's warning. The night passed uneventfully, though my sleep was fitful. Dreams of being watched plagued me, and I woke several times to the sounds of nocturnal animals moving through the undergrowth. By morning, the reservoir was cloaked in a haunting mist that transformed the landscape into something from a Gothic painting. Perfect for photography. I spent the early hours capturing the ethereal scene, losing myself in the viewfinder of my camera. The fog muffled all sound, creating an eerie silence broken only by the occasional call of a distant bird. As the sun burned through the mist, I noticed something unusual on the opposite shore. What looked like old stone structures partially reclaimed by vegetation. Intrigued, I decided to hike around to investigate. The trail skirting the reservoir was overgrown but passable. About halfway around, I came across a rusted sign barely legible through years of exposure. Ravenwood Dam Project, restricted area. Below it, in smaller text, relocated cemetery access, authorized personnel only. A chill ran through me despite the warming day. I knew many reservoirs were created by flooding valleys, sometimes requiring the relocation of entire towns, but the sign's ominous tone gave me pause. Curiosity won out over caution. I continued along the path until I reached the stone structures I'd spotted earlier. They weren't buildings as I'd first thought, but the exposed foundations of what once had been a small community, remnants that appeared when the reservoir's water level was low. Nearby stood a chain-link fence surrounding what had to be the relocated cemetery mentioned on the sign, rows of weathered headstones at odd angles, as if they'd been placed with haste rather than reverence. As I raised my camera to document the scene, a voice behind me nearly stopped my heart. "You're trespassing, miss." I whirled around to find a man in his 60s watching me with undisguised hostility. He wore faded overalls and a flannel shirt, a baseball cap shading eyes that never quite met mine. "This area is restricted." "I'm sorry," I stammered, lowering my camera. "I didn't realize. I was just taking photos and saw this place from across the water." "Well, now you know," he replied flatly. "Best head back to wherever you came from." He gestured vaguely behind me, and I noticed a younger man emerging from the trees, similar features, perhaps his son, carrying a hunting rifle casually at his side. Not pointed at me, but the message was clear. "Of course," I said, trying to keep my voice steady as I backed away. "I'll go now. Sorry to intrude." The older man nodded, saying nothing as I retreated down the path. Once I was around the bend and out of sight, I broke into a jog, eager to put distance between myself and the unwelcoming pair. When I finally reached my van, I was breathing hard, partly from exertion, partly from the unsettling encounter. As I started the engine, I noticed a piece of paper tucked under my windshield wiper. My stomach dropped. The note, written in block letters, read, "Outsiders who ask questions don't stay long." No signature, just the vague threat hanging in the air like the morning mist. I should have left then. Any reasonable person would have. But something about the cemetery, the sunken foundations, And now this note awakened the investigative instinct that had drawn me to photography in the first place. What were they hiding? What happened in Ravenwood that made them so hostile to visitors? Instead of driving away, I headed into town to use the library's internet connection. The local history section might have answers about this reservoir and the community it had swallowed. It was a decision that would set in motion events I still have nightmares about. The first step down a path from which there would be no easy return. The Ravenwood Public Library was a single-room affair housed in what had once been a church. The elderly librarian glanced up from her romance novel as I entered, her eyes narrowing slightly at the sight of an unfamiliar face. I smiled and asked about local history resources. She pointed me toward a dusty shelf in the corner without returning my smile. The collection was small but revealing. A leather-bound volume titled Ravenwood County Records, 1950 to 1970, contained newspaper clippings about the reservoir's construction. The project had been controversial. The valley had contained a small settlement called Mercer's Mill, no relation to me, despite sharing my last name. The residents had been forcibly relocated in 1967 when the dam was built, their homes and businesses submerged beneath the rising waters. More disturbing were the mentions of the cemetery relocation. According to one article, not all graves had been moved before the flooding began. A sudden storm had accelerated the reservoir's filling, leaving dozens of graves underwater. Local officials had declared the situation unavoidable, but quotes from displaced residents suggested otherwise. One particularly haunting statement from a protester: "They drowned our dead along with our history. Some things won't stay buried under that water." As I was photographing the article with my phone, I realized the librarian was standing behind me, watching. I hadn't heard her approach. "Finding what you need?" she asked, her voice carrying an edge that matched her sharp gaze. "Yes, thank you," I replied, trying to sound casual. "Just researching the history of the reservoir. It's fascinating." "Is it?" She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Some histories aren't meant for tourist brochures, miss. Some things are best left alone." Before I could respond, the library door opened, and she straightened, moving away to greet the newcomer, the younger man from the cemetery, now wearing a sheriff's deputy uniform. My pulse quickened as his eyes locked on me immediately. He spoke briefly with the librarian, who nodded in my direction. Then he approached, thumbs hooked in his belt loops, posture deliberately relaxed, but eyes alert and cold. "Ma'am, I understand you're staying out by the reservoir," he said without introducing himself. His name badge read Deputy Mercer. A chill ran through me at the coincidence. "Just for a night or two," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I'm a photographer just passing through. We don't get many visitors here," he continued, as if I hadn't spoken, "especially one so interested in our local history." He gestured to the book open before me. "Any particular reason for your interest in Mercer's Mill?" The way he emphasized the name made me certain it wasn't a casual question. "Just curious," I said carefully. "I like learning about the places I visit." His smile never reached his eyes. "Well, as our guest, you should know the reservoir area isn't safe for camping. There's been incidents. I'd hate for anything to happen to you out there all alone." The threat was thinly veiled at best. "I appreciate your concern," I managed, gathering my things. "I'll keep that in mind." As I walked toward the door, he called after me. "By the way, that name of yours, Mercer, any family from around here?" I paused, hand on the doorknob. "No," I lied, unsure why I felt compelled to deny any connection. "Pure coincidence." His expression told me he didn't believe me. "Coincidences are rare in Ravenwood, miss. Real rare." The sunlight outside was blinding after the library's dimness, but it did nothing to warm the chill that had settled into my bones. As I walked to my van, I noticed people watching from storefronts and parked cars, some openly staring, others pretending not to notice me while tracking my every move. Something was deeply wrong in this town. The hostility went beyond the usual small-town suspicion of outsiders. These people seemed afraid, not of me, exactly, but of what my presence might stir up. And that note on my windshield hadn't been a random act of xenophobia. It had been a warning. I slid behind the wheel, hands trembling slightly as I started the engine. The smart decision would be to leave immediately, to put Ravenwood in my rearview mirror and never look back. But the connection to my own name nagged at me. Could there be some forgotten branch of my family tree here? Was that why Deputy Mercer had reacted so strongly? I drove slowly through town, feeling eyes on me from every direction. As I passed the small diner on the main street, I noticed a very old woman sitting alone by the window, staring directly at me. Unlike the others, she didn't look away when I caught her gaze. Instead, she raised her hand in what seemed like recognition, then deliberately pointed toward the road leading out of town. Another warning? Or something else entirely? I hesitated at the intersection. Left would take me back to the reservoir. Right would lead me away from Ravenwood forever. I had seconds to decide as a police cruiser appeared in my mirror, Deputy Mercer at the wheel. He flashed his lights once, the signal clear, move along. I signaled right, toward the highway, and watched in my mirror as his cruiser fell back, apparently satisfied I was leaving. But as soon as he turned at the next corner, I circled back through a side street. Something was buried in Ravenwood's past, something connected to those submerged graves and possibly to my own name. Before I left, I needed answers, even if those answers came with risks I couldn't yet imagine. Night fell quickly in the narrow valley that cradled Ravenwood. I'd spent the afternoon driving aimlessly through the surrounding countryside, waiting for darkness, before cautiously returning to a different spot near the reservoir. This location was less ideal, hidden in a dense stand of trees about half a mile from the water, but offered better concealment from passing vehicles. My plan was reckless, born more from stubborn curiosity than good sense. I would return to the cemetery under cover of darkness, photograph the headstones, and search for any bearing my family name. If there was a connection, I needed to know. If not, I could leave with a clear conscience, writing off the town's hostility as typical rural xenophobia. I waited until nearly midnight before setting out, dressed in dark clothing with my camera and a powerful flashlight. The forest was alive with night sounds, rustling leaves, scurrying animals, the occasional hoot of an owl, but human presence seemed absent. The reservoir appeared as a black void in the landscape, reflecting distant stars, but revealing nothing of what lay beneath its surface. The cemetery stood as I had seen it earlier, surrounded by chain-link fence, rows of askew headstones dimly visible in the moonlight. The gate was secured with a padlock, but the fence was old, with several sections where the bottom had pulled away from the ground. I found one such spot and wriggled underneath, trying to ignore the uncomfortable symbolism of crawling into a graveyard under darkness. Once inside, I moved methodically, using my phone's flashlight on its lowest setting to examine the names on each stone. Many were worn nearly illegible, dates ranging from the early 1800s to the 1960s, generations of families who had lived and died in the valley before the waters came. Several stones bore the name Mercer, confirming my suspicions about a potential family connection. I photographed each one, planning to research the names later. At the far corner of the cemetery stood a larger monument, a stone obelisk with names carved on all four sides. As I approached, my light revealed it was a memorial to those whose graves couldn't be relocated before the flooding. Dozens of names, with one line at the bottom that sent ice through my veins. May they rest in peace beneath the waters that should never have claimed them. The sound of voices snapped me back to the present danger of my situation. Flashlight beams swept through the trees near the shore, at least 3 separate lights, moving purposefully in my direction. I killed my own light immediately, crouching low behind the obelisk. Check the cemetery. A voice called, Deputy Mercer's voice. She was asking questions about it earlier. They knew I hadn't left town. Somehow, they'd track me back to the reservoir. I needed to move, fast. The fence offered no protection now. They would see me trying to crawl under. My only option was to retreat toward the water and circle around to approach my van from another direction. I crept through the darkness, using the headstones for cover until I reached the unfenced side of the cemetery that faced the reservoir. The shoreline here was steep and rocky, difficult to navigate even in daylight. But the approaching flashlights left me no choice. I scrambled down the embankment, loose stones shifting treacherously under my feet. There, by the water, someone had spotted me. The beams converged on my position as I abandoned stealth for speed, half running, half sliding down toward the reservoir's edge. A gunshot cracked through the night, the bullet striking stone somewhere to my right. They weren't just trying to scare me off anymore. This was a hunt. I reached the water's edge, momentarily trapped between the advancing lights and the dark expanse of the reservoir. The shoreline curved around a small peninsula. If I could reach it, I might be able to double back toward the forest and eventually to my van. I began picking my way along the rocky shore, trying to stay low and move quickly over the uneven terrain. Behind me, voices called to each other as they spread out to cut off potential escape routes. I heard engines starting, vehicles moving to block the roads. This wasn't just a few angry locals. This was an organized effort involving much of the town. Whatever secret they were protecting, they were willing to kill to keep it. As I rounded the peninsula, my foot slipped on wet stone, sending me crashing into the shallow water. The splash seemed deafening in the tense silence, and immediately flashlight beams swung in my direction. I froze, partially submerged, as voices approached. "She's in the water," someone shouted. "Don't let her get away." Desperate, I made the only choice available. I pushed off from the rocky bottom and began swimming silently away from shore, deeper into the reservoir. The black water closed over my head as I submerged, using my years of competitive swimming experience to propel myself underwater, surfacing only for quick breaths. The cold was shocking, instantly numbing my extremities, but fear kept me moving. When I finally surfaced at what I judged to be a safe distance, the shoreline was dotted with flashlights, their beams sweeping across the water's surface. I treaded water, trying to control my breathing and suppress the shivers that threatened to overtake me. I couldn't stay in the water long. Hypothermia would claim me if the townspeople didn't, but returning to shore meant certain capture. As I floated, something brushed against my leg underwater, something solid but yielding. I kicked away instinctively, panic rising. It couldn't be a fish, it was too substantial. Again, something touched my calf, and this time I felt what seemed like fingers grasping briefly before slipping away. The impossible truth dawned on me as I fought to stay calm. I wasn't alone in these waters. Whether trapped in submerged ruins or disturbed from their resting places by the currents, the dead of Mercer's Mill were still here. And now, I was in their domain, directly above the town that had been sacrificed for this reservoir. I had to make a choice: risk capture on shore or face whatever dwelled in the depths below. As another hand, unmistakably a hand this time, clutched at my ankle, the decision was made for me. I kicked hard and struck out for the distant shore, away from the searching lights, willing myself to ignore the increasing touches from below as I swam through the graveyard beneath the water. The water grew colder with each stroke, as if deliberately trying to sap my strength. What had begun as occasional touches from below became more insistent, tugs at my clothing, fingers grazing my skin, a pressure against my back that felt disturbingly like an embrace. I fought the urge to scream, knowing it would bring my pursuers immediately. Instead, I channeled my terror into speed, arms cutting through the black water with desperate efficiency. I aimed for a section of shoreline where the trees grew close to the water's edge, offering immediate cover if I could reach it. The distance seemed impossible, my muscles burning with exertion, lungs starved for proper breath. Below me, the unseen presence grew more agitated, as if sensing my escape. Something gripped my ankle with surprising strength, attempting to drag me downward. In that moment of pure, primal fear, I kicked with every ounce of remaining strength, felt my foot connect with something solid that gave way with a sensation I'll never forget, like striking dense, waterlogged wood. The grip loosened, and I surged forward, finally feeling my feet touch the muddy bottom as the shore rose to meet me. I crawled from the water like some primordial creature, gasping and shaking violently. The autumn night air, which had seemed mild earlier, now cut through my soaked clothes like knives. I crouched in the shadows beneath a large oak, trying to orient myself while scanning for pursuers. The opposite shore still flickered with moving lights, but they seemed focused on the area where I'd entered the water. Taking advantage of their misdirected attention, I slipped into the forest, moving as quietly as my shivering body would allow. I needed to circle around to my van without crossing any roads where they might have patrols. The forest was disorienting in the darkness, but I kept the reservoir to my left, using it as a reference point to navigate. After what felt like hours of careful movement, stopping frequently to listen for voices or engines, I finally spotted my van through the trees. It appeared undisturbed, but I approached cautiously, watching for any sign of an ambush. When I was certain no one was waiting, I retrieved the spare key from its magnetic box under the frame and slipped inside, locking the doors immediately. The relief of being back in my sanctuary was overwhelming. I stripped off my wet clothes, toweled myself dry, and changed into warm layers, fighting to control the violent shaking that threatened to overtake me. My phone was ruined from the water, and the camera I'd abandoned in my flight would likely never be recovered. All evidence of what I'd seen at the cemetery was lost, except for what was burned into my memory. I needed to leave immediately, but starting the engine would announce my presence to anyone nearby. Instead, I decided to wait until dawn when I might have a better chance of slipping away unnoticed. I huddled under blankets in the back of the van, listening intently for any sound outside while trying to process what had happened in the reservoir. Those weren't hallucinations born of fear and cold water. Something was in that reservoir, the remnants of those who hadn't been properly laid to rest before the valley was flooded. Whether they were actually trying to drag me down or merely reaching out in some form of recognition, I couldn't be sure. But the name connection couldn't be coincidence. The Mercers buried in that cemetery were my ancestors, and somehow the townspeople knew it. As gray light finally began filtering through the trees, I prepared to leave. The forest seemed quiet. Perhaps they had given up the search or assumed I'd drowned in the reservoir. I started the engine, wincing at the sound that seemed unnaturally loud in the morning stillness, and carefully navigated back to the access road. I was less than a mile from the main highway when I rounded a bend and found my path blocked by 2 police cruisers and a pickup truck. Deputy Mercer stood in the center of the road, shotgun resting casually against his shoulder. Beside him was the elderly woman I'd seen in the diner window, the one who had warned me to leave. I slammed on the brakes, instinctively throwing the van into reverse, but a glance in my mirror revealed another vehicle blocking my retreat. I was trapped. Deputy Mercer approached slowly, his expression unreadable as he gestured for me to lower my window. With no options left, I complied. "Adrian Mercer," he said, not a question, but a confirmation. "You should have left when you had the chance." "What do you want from me?" I demanded, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I was just taking photographs. You were asking questions, looking into things better left forgotten." He glanced at the elderly woman, who had moved to stand beside him. "This is Eliza Mercer, your great-aunt, I believe." The woman studied me with eyes that seemed to hold decades of sorrow. "You have your grandmother's look about you," she said softly. "She was wise enough to leave before the flooding, before the bargain." "What bargain?" I whispered, a chill running through me that had nothing to do with my midnight swim. Deputy Mercer's face hardened. "The one that keeps this town alive. The one that requires payment from time to time." He raised his shotgun slightly. "And payment is due." In that moment, I understood with horrifying clarity. The relocated cemetery, the submerged graves, the hostility toward outsiders who asked questions. It was all connected to whatever agreement had been made when the valley was flooded. And somehow, my family was central to it. "The reservoir wants its own," Eliza said, her voice trembling. "It's always been Mercer's. That's why we watch for your name, why we keep track of the bloodline. Better a distant cousin who won't be missed than one of our own children." My mind raced as I processed her words. The incidents, with missing hikers or tourists, they weren't accidents or simple murders. They were sacrifices to whatever dwelled beneath the reservoir's surface, entities that had once been my ancestors but were now something else entirely. "I won't let you do this," I said, my hand moving slowly toward the gear shift. If I could ram through the blockade, I might have a chance, slim as it was. Deputy Mercer seemed to read my intention. He raised his shotgun to eye level. "You don't have a choice. The way I see it, you drowned last night while trespassing. Tragic accident. Your van will be found submerged next week when the levels drop." His finger tightened on the trigger. "Nothing personal, just keeping our bargain." What happened next remains a blur in my memory. As Mercer prepared to fire, the ground beneath us trembled. At first, I thought it was my own fear causing me to shake, but then I saw the astonished expressions on their faces as they struggled to keep their balance. The road itself seemed to ripple, cracks spreading across the asphalt like lightning. From the direction of the reservoir came a sound I can only describe as a moan. Deep, resonant, rising from far below the earth. Water began seeping up through the cracks in the road, dark and foul-smelling. The men at the roadblock looked around in confusion and growing terror. "It's not possible," Eliza whispered. They've never come this far from the water. I seized the moment of distraction to throw my van into drive and accelerate straight toward the gap between the police cruiser and pickup. Deputy Mercer fired, the shotgun blast shattering my side window and sending glass flying, but the sudden movement of the ground threw off his aim. I crashed through the makeshift barricade, metal screaming against metal as I forced my way past. In my rearview mirror, I witnessed a scene that still haunts my nightmares. Dark water was pouring from every crack in the ground now, and with it came figures, indistinct shapes that moved with jerking, unnatural motions. The men were firing their weapons, the muzzle flashes illuminating glimpses of waterlogged forms reaching with blackened hands. Above it all, Eliza Mercer stood motionless, arms outstretched as if in welcome or supplication. I drove without stopping, pushing my van to its limits until I crossed the county line and then the state border. I didn't feel safe until I reached Indiana, and even then, I checked my rearview mirror constantly, half expecting to see water pooling beneath my tires or Deputy Mercer's cruiser in pursuit. I never reported what happened. Who would believe me? A flooded town rising to reclaim its descendants? A generations-old bargain to sacrifice distant family members to appease whatever lurked beneath the reservoir? I had no evidence, no witnesses, nothing but my own traumatic memories and the nightmares that still wake me screaming. I abandoned Vanlife after Ravenwood. Some freedoms come at too high a cost, and the open road no longer feels like liberation but exposure. I live in a high-rise apartment in Chicago now, as far from large bodies of water as I can manage in the Midwest. I've researched my family history extensively, documenting every branch and twig of the Mercer family tree, particularly those with connections to Ohio. Sometimes, when it rains heavily, I stand at my window and watch the water flow down the glass, forming rivulets that seem to reach toward me with deliberate purpose. And I wonder if the bargain made in Ravenwood is truly satisfied, or if the hunger of what dwells beneath those dark waters might someday find me, even here, so far from home. The engine of my old Ford Transit hums as I pull off the highway, the glow of Columbus fading in the rearview. I'm Elias Whitaker, 32 years old, from Portland, Oregon. Been living this van life dream for 2 years, chasing freedom and cheap gas. Ohio's not my usual vibe, but a freelance gig editing travel blogs brought me here. I'm aiming for a quiet spot to park for the night, somewhere off the grid. My van, lovingly named Betsy, is my home. Solar panels, a tiny fridge, and a bed that's seen better days. I've got a knack for finding hidden gems to camp, but tonight, I'm just beat. The GPS points me toward a small town called Black Hollow, about an hour from Columbus. Sounds peaceful enough, right? I figure I'll find a secluded lot, crack a beer, and call it a night. Black Hollow's main road is a ghost town, lined with shuttered shops and a diner that looks like it hasn't served a burger since the 80s. I drive past a flickering streetlight, my headlights catching a faded sign. Welcome to Black Hollow, EST 1892. Something about it feels off, like the town's holding its breath. I shake it off, probably just road fatigue. I spot a dirt road veering into a wooded area, perfect for stealth camping. No trespassing signs, so I ease Betsy down the path, tires crunching over gravel. The trees close in, branches scraping the van's roof. I'm used to tight spots, like that time I parked in a Montana forest and woke up to a moose staring me down. This feels different, though. The air's heavy, like it's waiting for something. I park in a clearing, surrounded by dense pines. It's pitch black outside, no moon to light the way. I lock the doors, double-check the windows, and settle in. My routine's simple. Curtains up, stove on, heat some chili. The van's my fortress, but tonight, I can't shake this itch, like I'm being watched. I tell myself it's nothing, same feeling I had in Nevada when a coyote turned out to be my stalker. I laugh it off, but my hand lingers on the pepper spray by my bed. Black Hollow's probably just another sleepy town, full of folks who keep to themselves. Still, I keep my phone charged, signal weak, but there. I sip my beer, trying to focus on the hum of crickets outside. The chili's warming up when I hear it, a low, deliberate crunch, like boots on gravel. My heart skips. I kill the stove, ears straining. Could be an animal, maybe a deer. I've had raccoons rummage around before, like that time in Oregon when one stole my entire bag of marshmallows. But this sounds heavier, purposeful. I peek through a gap in the curtain, but it's too dark to see anything. My breath catches, fogging the window. I tell myself to chill. Probably just a local checking out the van. Happens sometimes. People get curious about vanlifers. I wait, but the sound doesn't come again. Maybe I imagined it. I force a laugh, but my grip on the pepper spray tightens. I crawl into bed, pulling the blanket tight. The van's cozy, but tonight, it feels like a cage. I think about my friend Mara, who's crashing in Columbus for a music festival. She warned me about small towns, said some folks out here don't like strangers. I brushed it off. Mara's always dramatic. But now, her words stick. I check my phone again. 1 bar? Enough to call for help if I need it. I try to sleep, but every rustle outside spikes my pulse. I'm used to solitude, but this feels different, like the forest itself is watching. I tell myself I'm overreacting. Tomorrow, I'll head back to Columbus, maybe crash with Mara. For now, I just need to make it through the night. The air in the van grows colder, and I crank the heater. It's October, and Ohio's nights bite. I think about my last gig in Portland, editing a blog about haunted campgrounds. Laughed it off then, but now, I'm wondering if I parked on some cursed patch of dirt. Stupid thought, but it's hard to shake. I glance at the curtains, half expecting a face to press against the glass. Nothing, just darkness. I'm not a paranoid guy. Hell, I've camped in sketchier spots than this. Like that time in Arizona when a storm nearly flipped Betsy. But this place, Black Hollow, it's got a vibe I can't pin down. It's not just quiet, it's dead. I start scrolling through my phone, looking for a distraction. I pull up a map of Black Hollow, curious about this place. Not much online, just a Wikipedia stub about coal mining and a shuttered factory. No mention of campgrounds or parks, which is weird for a spot this rural. I find a local forum, but it's mostly complaints about taxes and potholes. One post catches my eye though. Outsiders keep poking around. They don't belong here. My stomach twists. Probably just small-town grumbling, like when folks in Idaho gave me dirty looks for my Oregon plates. Still, I bookmark the page, just in case. I'm about to doze off when I hear it again. Another crunch, closer this time. My eyes snap open. It's not an animal. Too steady, too human. I hold my breath, listening. The sound stops, but now there's something else. A faint murmur, like voices, low and muffled. My skin crawls. I'm miles from town, so who the hell's out there? I think about flipping on the exterior lights, but that'd just scream, "Hey, I'm here." I stay frozen, heart hammering. Maybe it's just kids messing around, like those teens in California who TP'd my van once. But deep down, I know it's not. Something's wrong with this place. I slide out of bed, moving slow, careful not to rock the van. I grab my flashlight, keeping it off for now. The voices are gone, but the silence is worse, like the calm before a storm. I'm tempted to start the engine and bolt, but I don't know these roads, and Betsy's not exactly a race car. Plus, I'd look like an idiot peeling out over nothing. I tell myself to stay calm, think it through. Maybe I parked somewhere I shouldn't have. Locals can get territorial. Happened in Wyoming when I accidentally camped on private land. But there were no signs here, no fences. Still, my gut's screaming that Black Hollow's not as empty as it seems. I'm crouched in the dark, flashlight in one hand, pepper spray in the other, listening for those voices. Nothing, just the wind rattling the pines. My heart's still racing, but I'm starting to feel like a paranoid idiot. Maybe it was just a couple of locals hiking or something. I've had late-night scares before, like in Colorado when I swore I heard a bear, but it was just a branch snapping. I set the flashlight down and climb back into bed, but sleep's not happening. The van feels too small, the air too thick. I check my phone again, still 1 bar. I think about texting Mara, but what would I even say? Hey, I'm freaked out by some maybe voices in the woods. She'd laugh me out of Ohio. I pull up the map again, zooming in on Black Hollow. The dirt road I took doesn't even show up on Google Maps, which is weird. I'm no cartographer, but I've never parked somewhere this off-grid by accident. I start wondering if I missed a sign, maybe a private property, marker hidden by the trees. Last year in Utah, I got chewed out by a rancher for parking on his land. No harm done, just a bruised ego. But this feels different. Black Hollow's got this vibe, like the town itself doesn't want me here. I shake it off and decide to move Betsy to a new spot at first light. No sense sticking around where I'm not welcome. The heater's humming, but I'm still shivering. I grab an extra blanket, trying to settle my nerves. That's when I notice my water jug's low, barely enough for coffee tomorrow. Great. I've got a spare in the back, but it's buried under my gear. I start digging through boxes, cursing myself for not organizing better. My last trip to New Mexico, I had everything neat, like a pro. Now it's chaos. I'm tossing clothes and tools when I hear a new sound, a faint tap, like metal on metal, coming from under the van. My stomach drops. Animals don't tap like that. I freeze, holding a pair of socks like they're a weapon. I tell myself it's probably nothing. Maybe a rock got lodged in the undercarriage when I drove in. Happened once in Idaho, drove me nuts until I pried it out. But this tap's rhythmic, deliberate. Tap, pause, tap. I grab the flashlight again, debating whether to check it out. Every horror movie I've ever seen screams, "Don't go outside, dumbass." But I can't just sit here, imagining some creep messing with Betsy. I'm not that guy who hides. I've faced down sketchy situations before, like when I talked my way out of a bar fight in Texas. Still, my hands are shaking as I unlatch the door. I crack the door open, just an inch, cold air rushing in. The forest's dead quiet. No crickets, no wind. That's not right. I've camped enough to know nature's never this silent. It's like the woods are holding their breath. I shine the flashlight under the van, half expecting to see a raccoon or a loose bolt. Nothing, just dirt and pine needles. But the tapping stopped. I'm about to close the door when I spot something. Scratches on the van's undercarriage, fresh ones, like someone dragged a knife across it. My blood runs cold. No way that's natural. I slam the door, lock it, and back away, heart pounding like a drum. I'm freaking out now, no denying it. Those scratches weren't there yesterday. I checked Betsy's undercarriage in Columbus for leaks. Someone's been under my van, and not for a friendly tune-up. I think about starting the engine and getting the hell out, but the dirt road's narrow, and I don't trust my night driving on unfamiliar terrain. Last time I tried that, in Montana, I nearly rolled into a ditch. I decide to wait till dawn, just a few hours away. I grab my pocket knife, not much but better than nothing, and shove a crate against the door. If someone's out there, they're not getting in without a fight. I'm pacing now, all 2 steps I can manage in the van. My mind's racing, piecing things together. The voices, the scratches, the dead silence. It's all adding up to something disturbing. I think about that forum post again. Outsiders don't belong here. Maybe Black Hollow's got some locals who take that seriously, like those vigilante types you hear about in small towns. I've read stories about places like that, where strangers get run off, or worse. I tell myself I'm jumping to conclusions, but my gut's screaming I've parked in the wrong damn place. I check the windows, making sure every curtain's tight. I try to calm down, focusing on practical stuff. I move the water jug to the front, repack my gear, anything to keep busy. But every creak of the van makes me jump. I'm starting to regret this whole Ohio trip. I should have stayed in Columbus, crashed at a Walmart lot like a normal vanlifer. Mara warned me about going too remote, said small towns can be scary for outsiders. I laughed it off, called her a city girl. Now, I'm wishing I'd listened. I check my phone again. No new messages, still 1 bar. I type out a text to Mara, just in case. Weird night in Black Hollow. Might need a couch tomorrow. I'm about to hit send when I hear it. A low, guttural laugh, close enough to make my skin crawl. It's not in my head. It's right outside the van, maybe 10 feet away. My breath catches, and I kill the phone's screen, plunging the van into darkness. The laugh cuts off, but I hear footsteps now, heavy and slow, circling the clearing. I grip the knife, every muscle tensed. This isn't kids or animals. Someone's out there, and they know I'm here. I'm trapped in my own home, in the middle of nowhere, and Black Hollow's starting to feel like a nightmare I can't wake up from. The footsteps stop, but my heart's pounding so loud I swear they can hear it. I'm crouched in the dark, knife in hand, staring at the van's door like it's gonna burst open any second. That laugh, low, mean, human, still echoes in my head. I've heard creepy stuff before, like coyotes howling in Nevada, but this is different. This is personal. I'm no hero, but I'm not helpless either. I've talked my way out of tight spots, like when a drunk guy in Arizona thought I cut him off. But this feels like a horror movie, and I'm the idiot who parked in the wrong town. I inch toward the driver's seat, thinking maybe I can start Betsy and peel out, Consequences be damned. I slide into the seat, keys shaking in my hand. The dashboard's glow feels too bright, like a beacon screaming, "Here I am." I hesitate, remembering the narrow dirt road. One wrong turn, and I'm stuck in a ditch, easy prey for whoever's out there. I glance at the side mirror, nothing but darkness. Then, a glint, quick and sharp, like metal catching light. My stomach lurches. Someone's moving out there, and they're not trying to hide anymore. I lock the doors again, even though I know it's pointless. If they want in, a flimsy van lock won't stop them. I'm trapped, and Black Hollow's turning into a nightmare. I grab my phone, hands sweaty, and check the text to Mara. Still unsent, one bar flickering. I hit send, praying it goes through. No reply, no signal confirmation. I'm alone. I think about yelling, maybe scaring them off, but that'd just confirm I'm awake. I've read about small-town folks who hate outsiders, stories of vandalism, even violence. Like that time in West Virginia, where a camper got his tires slashed for parking too long. But this feels worse, more deliberate, like they've done this before. I shove the phone in my pocket and grip the knife tighter, wishing I'd bought that baseball bat in Columbus. A thud hits the van's side, hard enough to rock it. I yelp, knife slipping from my sweaty palm. It's not a branch or an animal. This was a fist, maybe a boot. My blood runs cold. They're testing me, seeing if I'll react. I scramble to the floor, grabbing the knife, heart hammering. Another thud, this time near the back door. I bite my lip to keep from screaming. I've had close calls, like when a storm in Oregon trapped me in Betsy for 2 days, but this is terrifying on a whole new level. I'm not just stuck, I'm hunted. I crawl to the window, peeking through a curtain slit, but it's too dark to see anything. Then I hear it, a voice, rough and low, right outside. "Come out, city boy." My skin crawls. It's not a prank. There's venom in those words, like I've personally offended them by existing. I flash back to that forum post. Outsiders don't belong. This isn't just about parking in the wrong spot. These people, whoever they are, want me gone, or worse. I think about my buddy Theo, who grew up in a small town. He said some places have unwritten rules, and breaking them gets you in deep shit. I didn't listen then, but now I'm wishing I'd asked for details. Another thud, this time with a metallic scrape, like they're dragging something along Betsy's side. I wince, imagining fresh gouges in the paint. I'm pissed. She's my home, my lifeline, but fear's drowning out the anger. I'm not a fighter, never have been. Closest I got was breaking up a dog fight at a campsite in California. But this isn't dogs. These are people, and they're not messing around. I consider my options, stay quiet and hope they leave, or start the van and risk the road. Both feel like traps. I'm paralyzed, sweat dripping down my back, the air in the van suffocating. The voice comes again, closer, almost at the window. "We see you, drifter. Ain't no place for you here." My breath hitches. They know I'm awake, maybe even where I'm sitting. I picture them, faceless locals with knives, maybe guns, circling like wolves. I've never felt this kind of fear, not even when I got lost hiking in Utah and spent a night without shelter. This is raw, primal, like I'm prey. I clutch the knife, but it feels useless. I'm one guy in a tin can, and they've got the numbers, the home turf. I need a plan, but my mind's blank, stuck on that disturbing voice. A new sound cuts through, glass shattering. The back window. I spin around, heart in my throat, as cold air rushes in. They've smashed it, and now there's nothing between me and them but a curtain. I hear a chuckle, low and cruel, and something heavy scrapes against the broken edge. My mind screams to do something, anything, but I'm frozen. I think about Mara, about how I should have stayed in Columbus, about every dumb choice that led me here. The van's no longer safe. It's a trap, and I'm cornered. I need to move, but where? The forest? The road? Every choice feels like a death sentence. I inch toward the driver's seat again, desperate to act. My foot catches on a crate, sending it crashing. The noise is deafening in the silence, and I curse under my breath. The chuckles outside turn into full-on laughter, mocking, like they're enjoying this. "Clumsy, ain't he?" Another voice says, higher, almost gleeful. There's at least 2 of them, maybe more. My chest tightens. This isn't just scary anymore. It's a full-on horror show, and I'm the main character about to get axed. I grab the keys, hands trembling, knowing I've got seconds to decide. Stay and fight, or run and pray. Black Hollow's got me in its grip, and it's not letting go. I jam the keys into the ignition, heart hammering as Betsy's engine sputters to life. The laughter outside cuts off, replaced by shouts, angry, urgent. I don't wait to find out what they're planning. I slam the gas, tires spinning on gravel, and Betsy lurches forward, branches scraping the roof. The dirt road's barely wide enough, and my headlights catch twisted trees closing in. I've driven in panic before, like when a flash flood hit my campsite in Texas, but this is next-level terrifying. The smashed back window lets in freezing air, and I hear boots pounding behind me, voices yelling, "Get him!" My knuckles are white on the wheel. I'm not stopping, not for anything. The road twists, and I nearly clip a tree, swearing as Betsy fishtails. I'm no stunt driver. Closest I got was dodging potholes in Portland. My phone's buzzing in my pocket, probably Mara, but I can't check now. A rock pings off the van's side, then another, like they're throwing shit at me. I glance in the side mirror and see shapes moving in the dark, too close. Are they on foot? In a truck? I don't know, but they're not giving up. My mind's racing. Black Hollow's locals aren't just pissed. They're hunting me like an animal. I push Betsy harder, praying the tires hold. This is horror straight out of a nightmare. A sharp turn looms, and I yank the wheel, barely keeping control. The road's getting rougher, ruts jolting the van like a roller coaster. I think about that time in Wyoming when I got stuck in mud, took hours to dig out. If that happens now, I'm done. A loud crack echoes, and the van jerks. Something hit the rear bumper. My stomach drops. They're not just chasing, they're trying to stop me. I floor it, engine screaming, but Betsy's old, not built for this. The voices are fainter now, but I hear an engine revving in the distance. Shit, they've got a vehicle. I need to lose them, fast. I spot a fork in the road and swerve left, hoping it leads somewhere, anywhere, safer. The path narrows, trees scraping both sides. My headlights catch a rusted gate ahead, half open. I don't slow down, plowing through, the gate slamming against Betsy's hood. I wince but keep going. I've crashed through barriers before, like a fallen branch in Oregon, but this feels like a point of no return. The engine's whining, overheating, but I can't stop. The revving behind me's louder now. A truck, definitely. Its headlights flash in my mirrors, blinding. They're gaining, and I'm running out of road. The path opens into a clearing, and my heart sinks. It's a dead end, surrounded by dense forest. No way out. I slam the brakes, Betsy skidding to a stop. The truck's headlights flood the clearing, and I hear doors slam, voices barking orders. I'm trapped, like a rat in a cage. I grab my knife and pepper spray, knowing they're useless against a group. I've talked my way out of trouble before, like with that rancher in Utah, but these guys aren't here to chat. I scan the van for anything, a wrench, a crowbar, but there's nothing. The truck's engine cuts off, and footsteps crunch closer. I'm out of time. I bolt out the driver's door, sprinting for the trees. My flashlight's bouncing in my hand, barely lighting the way. Thorns tear at my legs, but I don't stop. I've run from danger before, like when a wildfire got too close in California, but this is pure horror. I hear them behind me, crashing through the brush, shouting, "He's there." A gunshot cracks, and I duck, heart in my throat. They're shooting now? I zigzag, praying they're bad shots. The forest's thick, but I'm no woodsman. I'm a city guy playing survivor. My lungs burn, but I keep moving, branches snapping underfoot. I trip over a root, hitting the ground hard. My flashlight rolls away, beam cutting through the dark. I scramble up, but my ankle's screaming, sprained, maybe worse. I grab the light, hobbling forward. The voices are closer, splitting up, like they're flanking me. I think about Mara, how she'd tell me to fight, not run. But I'm not a fighter, never was. I've always been the guy who slips away, like when I dodged a sketchy hitchhiker in Nevada. But there's no slipping away now. A beam of light sweeps the trees. Someone's got a spotlight. They're closing in, and I'm slowing down. I find a hollow under a fallen log and dive in, dirt in my mouth, heart pounding. I kill the flashlight, holding my breath. The footsteps are everywhere, snapping twigs, muttering curses. Where's the bastard? One growls, so close I smell his sweat. I clutch the knife, ready to stab if they find me. I've never hurt anyone, not even in self-defense, but I'm not dying in this forest. The spotlight swings over my hiding spot, and I freeze, praying they miss me. It's like that time I hid from a cop in Idaho for parking illegally, except this time, it's life or death. The light moves on, but they're still out there, hunting. I wait, muscles cramping, listening as the voices fade slightly. Maybe they're moving away. I'm about to crawl out when I hear a new sound, dogs barking. My blood runs cold. They've got dogs now. I'm screwed. I think about every horror story I've heard about small towns, about people vanishing without a trace. Black Hollow's not just unfriendly, it's a death trap. I need to move, but my ankle's shot, and the dogs are getting louder. I grip the pepper spray, knowing it's my last shot. The forest feels alive with danger, and I'm the prey, running out of places to hide. I crawl out from under the log, biting back a groan as my ankle throbs. The dogs are closer, their barks echoing like a horror soundtrack. I hobble forward, using trees for support, my flashlight off to stay hidden. I'm not thinking straight. Panic's taken over. I've been in bad spots before, like when I got stranded in a snowstorm in Colorado, but this is worse. These people want me dead, and I don't even know why. I keep moving, hoping to find a road, a house, anything. My phone's still in my pocket, but there's no signal out here. I'm alone, and Black Hollow's forest is swallowing me whole. I spot a faint glow through the trees, maybe a house, maybe a road. I limp toward it, ignoring the pain shooting up my leg. The dogs are still behind me, but the barks sound farther now. Maybe I've got a chance. I think about Mara, how she'd be freaking out if she knew. I should have texted her sooner, told her exactly where I was. That was my first mistake, going off-grid without a plan. I've always been cocky about Vanlife, thinking I could handle anything. Like that time I camped near a bear den in Montana and laughed it off. I'm not laughing now. The glow's closer, and I realize it's a clearing with a single streetlight. My heart leaps. Civilization. I stumble out of the trees, onto cracked pavement. It's a narrow road, no houses, but it's something. I check my phone, one bar, flickering. I try calling 911, but the call drops. I curse, limping down the road, praying for a car. The dogs are quiet now, but I hear an engine in the distance, low and rumbling. My gut twists. Is it them? I duck behind a rusted mailbox, watching as headlights appear. It's a pickup truck, moving slow. I'm torn, flag it down or hide. I choose to hide, heart pounding. The truck stops, idling, its headlights bathing the road. I hold my breath, crouched low. A door creaks open, and boots hit the ground. He's close. A voice says, the same rough one from the van. My blood freezes. It's them. I made a deadly mistake coming to this road. It's their territory. I should have stayed in the forest, circled back to Betsy. I've always trusted my instincts, like when I avoided a sketchy gas station in Arizona. But tonight, my instincts are failing me. I grip the pepper spray, ready to make a stand, but I know I'm outmatched. The footsteps come closer, and I hear a dog growl. I bolt, ignoring my ankle, sprinting across the road into the opposite woods. A shout goes up there, and the truck's engine roars. I'm running blind, branches whipping my face. The dogs are back, barking like they've got my scent. I'm not fast enough, not with my injury. I think about my family, my parents in Portland who begged me to quit Vanlife. I should have listened. This isn't just scary, it's a tragedy unfolding, and I'm the fool who walked into it. I trip again, crashing into a ditch, pain exploding in my leg. The dogs are closing in, and I hear laughter, cruel and triumphant. I drag myself up, pepper spray in hand, but it's useless. The truck's headlights flood the ditch, blinding me. Figures step out, silhouettes against the light. Told you, Drifter, one says, voice dripping with hate. I swing the spray, but a boot catches my wrist, sending it flying. I'm down, defenseless, as they close in. I think about Betsy, my home, probably trashed back in the clearing. I think about Mara, who'll never know what happened. My biggest mistake was thinking I could outrun Black Hollow's hate. I scream, but the forest swallows it, and the figures raise something heavy. A bat, maybe a crowbar. Pain explodes in my head, and the world tilts. I'm on the ground, blood in my mouth, vision fading. The dogs are snarling, but the voices are calm now, like they're done with the chore. I try to move, but my body's not listening. I've survived so much, storms, breakdowns, close calls, but not this. Black Hollow's locals don't just hate outsiders, they erase them. I see my mistake clearly now. I underestimated them. Thought I could slip through like always. I was wrong. The last thing I hear is the truck's engine, fading as they drive away, leaving me in the ditch, another ghost for their forest. I'm slipping, consciousness fading like a bad signal. I think about the blog I was editing, about haunted campgrounds. Maybe I'll be a story now, a warning for other vanlifers. Don't park in Black Hollow. Don't trust the quiet. My breathing slows, and the cold seeps in. I want to fight, to get up, but it's over. The tragedy isn't just my death. It's the life I could have had, the miles I'll never drive. I see Betsy's dashboard in my mind, the open road ahead. Then, nothing. Black Hollow's claimed me, and there's no coming back. The ditch is silent now, the truck long gone. My phone lies a few feet away, screen cracked. Mara's text finally delivered but unanswered. The streetlight flickers, casting shadows over the road. Somewhere, Betsy sits abandoned, a relic of my dreams. Black Hollow's locals will move on, their secret safe, their hatred fed. I'm just another outsider who didn't belong, a cautionary tale lost to the woods. The horror wasn't the chase or the pain. It was their eyes, cold and empty, as they ended me. That's the last image burned into my mind, a final, disturbing truth.